So let's get right to it. I want to go immediately to the music of the film, because it has become its own phenomenon in and of itself. Do you all have a favorite song on the soundtrack?
You know, good question. Of course, the classic Cry Little Sister.
Yeah.
We're friends with Gerard McMahon, G-Tom, so I gotta put a plug in for that. That's a classic, theme song of the movie. But I was speaking to one of you guys yesterday, and you brought up a song. Was Don't Let the Sun Go Down on this? With Roger Daltrey? What did he sing? What was the same song that Roger Daltrey sang?
Yes, it's on there.
Yes. Ah, I have your thing. You forgot it at my table. Jackie, right?
Oh, you have it?
I have it. Yeah, you left it behind. It was amazing in the rest. So this song, I want to go back and listen to it because I vaguely remember it. I think, wow, I forgot Roger Daltrey was on the soundtrack, but I'm going to go back and listen to that because I like that song. So I'll put that as my favorite for now.
Yeah.
I think it's People Are Strange, right?
Yes.
The way it opens up. And I have a pretty special memory of that song. So I'm originally from Ohio. This was the first thing that I ever done. So that must be honest, I don't remember a lot of it. But, so this was the first thing that I had ever done. I hadn't done a school play, a commercial, or anything. It was a pretty big movie. My dad was the one who was kind of pursuing a career in acting, and I got lucky. I got an audition for this part, and I kind of was Laddie. I was a punk kid with the hair, and so I met Marion Doherty, and immediately she took me to see Joel, and I got the part. So my dad kind of knew what it was. I didn't, So we finished. We go to the premiere. We're with Richard Donner and directors and big movie stars, and we're watching the premiere. And I had 18 or probably 20 Corbitts from Ohio with me, because they knew what this was. And then obviously People Are Strange. And so when you're an actor, it's a big deal to have your name on the credits, depending on sort of where you are. Laddie didn't have any lines, it was what it was. So I didn't even think I'd see my name. And all of a sudden, boom, also starring Chance Michael Corbitt. My entire family stands up. and really showed our Ohio roots. So, that has a fond memory because People Are Strange was playing that. So, yeah, for me,
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, we all love the sexy saxophone man song. Let's not deny it. So, Chance, for you, I wanted to ask, you were such a young actor when you did this film. You were the only actor of that age range in the film. Was there anyone in particular that made you feel comfortable on set, that kind of took you under your wing?
Really, yeah, I was always on the back of his bike, Billy for sure, but
Really, he made me feel comfortable because I was nervous. He was not nervous. This is the coolest little tango I've ever met. And I was kind of scared. I just got into acting, and him being there, and I had to look out for him, was an activity that kept me out of my head, out of fear. He really helped me.
Well, Billy and then Jamie, of course. Jamie Gertz was, there was a particular scene where you first meet Laddie, where Tim Capella is playing on the boardwalk, and we go running down, and they had, everybody that was in the audience of that particular show was local Santa Cruz extras that were there. They were really partying. And as we were going down, I'm 19 years old. I certainly thought I was older. And there was a guy, one of the extras, smoking a joint. He was really loud. Jamie smacked it out of his hand. He said, "Don't you know this is a 10-year-old?" So yeah, everybody was really protecting. But for me, it was Billy and Jamie that really were looking out for me because I probably would have gotten in trouble.
That's wonderful to hear. So you all stayed friends over the years?
Actually, I was really close with Brooke when I got the movie. We had the same agent. And I met him for the first time when I flew out to LA. He took me around LA, and I was a new actor. He had done a few things. I had one little part in the movie, but we bonded, and I didn't even realize. He was probably doing his homework to make that connection, but we became best friends and stayed friends, forever. And but since you guys have been coming, I said this the last time because it just hit me, because of the fans I've gotten to know Chance and Jason Patrick because we didn't have a lot of connection. You know, Jason's working every day, the Lost Boys are doing their thing, but really the life of this movie has brought us all so close together. Where I love Jason, I didn't really know him back then. Now he's like a brother. Alex Winter, I just went to see him on Broadway, Waiting for Godot, and we become great friends. But back then, you know, you come together, you have the experience. It's an intense thing, you know, a peak experience in your upbringing, but then you go your different ways. I stayed close with Brooke. We really reconnected about, 15 years ago, at the first, 20 years ago? The first convention that we went to over in UK, Milton Keynes, and then we really got to know each other. Yeah. So, you know, we built the bonds, but really it's the fans that brought us back together to have this deeper friendship. Thank you.
Build the fans.
Rob is here. Woo!
So, Billy, I want to ask you, your death in the film has become so iconic. Do you have anything about it that particularly stands out that maybe the fans might be surprised to hear about it?
You know,
You have a mic with you.
You know, that scene, I kind of vaguely remember Joel, you know, at that point saying, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm kind of sure, not sure, but I think so. That he said, can you come up with a line at this point? And then I think I came up with the line, you miss sucker. You know, but I went back to the script to look in it, and there was no ending like that. It wasn't scripted. So I think at that point we found it in the rehearsal process. And you know, Corey, Death by Stereo, but you know, that whole scene is just crazy because I have to assign You Miss Sucker to people because they want to hear it, but I have to ask them because it's also pretty, you know, pretty offensive or whatever, but then I wrote Death by Stereo as well. But yeah, no, that ending and those lines have served me well over the years.
Do you guys have some questions? Raise your hand if you have a question. Yes?
What was your favorite scene in the movie?
Favorite scene to shoot or favorite scene to watch as a fan?
To shoot.
To shoot, there you go.
I can give you the exact opposite answer.
I'll start with the opposite. I have a few favorites. I mean, every scene was great, but you know, the first time we were on the boardwalk up in Santa Cruz, and we're on these motorcycles that we got to ride a little bit. We also had stunt riders, but we're on that boardwalk. The big 10K lights are shining down on us. You know, all the locals come out, and they're all hippies and pads or whatever they came out and in their clothes, and it felt like, you know, and I didn't really know that I wanted to be an actor yet, but I sort of fell into it. But that day, it was so much adrenaline, so much excitement, and it was like we were the circus that come to town up in Santa Cruz, and that was a monumental scene for me. And then I liked the video store scene, and I liked the feed when we came down off the feed up on the hill, you know.
What's your least favorite?
So, Laddie's big scene where he comes out of bed. Have you seen Holy? 10? I was 10, so I was about your age when I shot this movie, and best summer of my life, you know. Made some intense connections that still to this day are my brothers, but there was the scene with Laddie where he comes out of bed. Holy, it's the attack of Eddie Munster. So it's a pretty, you know, back in the olden times when they did this movie, there was no CGI, it was what it was. So they cut a hole in the bed. Air compressor ring that was around, they cut up some bed sheets and some confetti stuff, action. I vamp out, I come out, you know, look good. Okay, take two. I didn't want to go back in. Matter of fact, I refused to go back in. So, Joel is brilliant as he is, and, you know, obviously being my first time and really hadn't experienced anything like that. So okay, he's not going back in. I was petrified. I was afraid. I was scared. You know, I look back now, it's kind of silly, but you know.
Yeah. You're a 10-year-old stuck in a mattress.
So now it's a little bit of a spoiler, but if you go back and you watch that scene, Larry, this amazing stunt double. He was a fully grown man, but you know, a little guy. But when you're a fully grown man, you have a different frame. So he's mixed in there. So if you look at Laddie kind of changes a little bit. So to answer your question, it's a very good question, by the way.
Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Yes.
What were your thoughts when you found out that Lost Boys was being turned into a musical? And are you going to see it?
I love it. I mean, to me, it suits, rock and roll musical. And when I saw Alex, who's crushing it right now, Broadway, he's working that out. So I hope we can all go to the premiere. And G-Tom, I think his song is going to be in there. So I look forward to it. The only thing I'm upset about, which I think is crazy, is apparently, as of last I heard, they didn't have a Laddie or a grandpa, which I think is ridiculous.
I didn't know that.
It could change. It could change. But
Yeah, it's right now, right? Yeah, so
I think it's awesome. I think it's just a natural progression of something that it's 40 years later, we're still able to come up here and talk about a movie that meant so much to so many people that it sort of maturates into a Broadway musical, and good on them, and I'm sure it's going to be awesome. So.
Great question. I have that one. Yes.
So this might be an unusual one, but I was thinking about the scene where the vamps are hanging upside down in the cavern. And obviously, I know you could have done it standing up, pretending like you were hanging upside down, but how did you do it? Were you actually hanging upside down, or?
We were. Real time. We had harnesses, and then they hoisted us up. But before we got the hoist, they put the contacts in, which at the time they didn't have the soft contacts, so they put these half-cup glass contacts. They were, you had to get drops every 10 minutes or it would dry out. And they hoisted us up, and while they're hoisting us up, the wires are going over wood, and there's dust falling down, and it got in our eyes. But who was it that scratched? Alice Winter's eye actually got scratched pretty badly. I mean, he went to the hospital. So that was like torture. But it looked cool.
It looks like awesome. Suffer for your art. Good question, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, for Billy, were you already a motorcycle rider before coming in? And how was that process like in regards to being able to shoot that? And for Chance, being that young, was there any moment behind the scenes where you're like, maybe I want to get into those motorcycles and probably start to learn? How was that process for you guys?
It was great. I had actually, when I was younger, I had a friend who had a bunch of Yamaha 80s, these little enduro bikes. And we used to go out in the potato fields down Long Island and race and jump and fly. And, I was 12, 13, up to 15, and I loved it. And then as I got into high school, I rode a little bit and then it ended but I knew how to ride. And then we got to spend about a couple of weeks with Gary Davis, who was the stunt coordinator for the film. And we went out to his farm out in LA, out in the hills somewhere, and rode on bigger bikes than the 80. And we trained and rode, and it was a lot of fun. But he told me a story that sometimes I've shared, but it's kind of interesting. His kids became great riders and jumpers. But at the time, Evel Knievel had gotten, older, and he had done so many jumps, and his body was wrecked. But he told me the story. I think it's true. I mean, I believe Gary. In some of those stadium jumps, where you'd be inside, you'd see Evel come out and put on his helmet, get on the bike, he'd go behind the tunnel, disappear, and then come around because he's got to pick up speed and come out to shoot. Well, when he got there, Gary was on another bike with the same costume. He'd come out flying down the ramp with this big Harley, what were they, the 750 big bike, flying over the ramp, clear all the things, and then he'd turn the bike sideways. He'd come down the ramp like he crashed the bike, and he'd be laying down there, and they'd carry him off. and everybody be shocked. This is showbiz, you know. And then Evil will come out, take his helmet off, and wave to the crowd. But he didn't make the jumps at the end of his career. But that was a cool story. I thought.
So I was, I think the seat was taller than my head. So I certainly climbed up on him, and you know, I ride. But I was a skateboarder back then. That's what I did. I love skateboarding, and you know, we would. So we stayed in Santa Cruz. We stayed in a hotel. It was a Holiday Inn. It's where they had us all. And so we would, off days, you know, skateboard down to the boardwalk, and that was a trip. But to the bikes, they were just. I'm short still, but I was way short back then. They were too big. Yeah.
Great question, thank you. Yes?
I think this is an odd question coming from an actress's point of view. Getting to meet Kiefer would be cool. It would be cool. But at any point did you guys get to meet Donald Sutherland? And is he like Donald we think he would be in real life?
I don't think we ever met Donald Sutherland, but I mean, he's legendary, and Kiefer's got it too, you know, they're both phenomenal actors. I remember as a kid watching Kelly's Heroes and just thinking that this guy was the coolest, and getting to meet Kiefer and at such a young age. Him and Jason, I mean, they were seasoned actors at that young age. I mean, you know, Kiefer was coming off of what was that movie? Stand By Me, and a bunch of films. And Jason grew up in the theater, and he really helped shape this film with Joel. Like, he turned down the film about 10 times because it still hadn't become what you see on the screen. So working with these guys was amazing. You know, being in the presence of Diane Weiss, she was coming off of an Academy Award, I think, for one of her films. I can't remember which one. But yeah, it was amazing. Kiefer is, I've gotten to know Kiefer now over the years too, and he's amazing. Yeah.
It was interesting for a lot of us. It was we hadn't really done anything, so the acting chops, they weren't built yet, you know. And there were, I mean, obviously Jason Patrick, he brilliant performance. And Corey, yeah, of course. But I think specifically for this film, Joel, the way he directed it, there was our very first scene that I shot was Grandpa's house, when Sam and Michael are running after the Nook when the vampires are coming in the house. And we're all stands, Jamie, me, Feldman, I think, Newlander, and we're yelling for Sam and Michael to come back. And I'm laughing, you know, as I'm acting. It was the first thing I'd ever done. And Joel, to his brilliance, you know, could have corrected me or reprimanded, you know, hey, what are you doing? You're supposed to be scared. He didn't, right? And he learned how to edit, make the camera work to where, and it was really freeing for an actor for the first time to go to, I mean, it's a huge movie. I mean, absolutely huge. And I was so unaware, but I guess that's Joel's brilliance. And watching Kiefer and watching Jason and Corey, and I didn't have any scenes with Diane, but watching them really, really show their chops, you know, it was definitely an education that was invaluable. So I'm not sure if Donald was ever on the set, to be honest with you, but it's a really good question. Really good question.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yes?
So, in your opinion, why didn't Grandpa give the heads up to the family about the vampires?
Controversial, yes.
There's something that's interesting. So I've shared this with a couple of you that I've met. There's this thing on YouTube, right? I think it was, you know, fan narrative. I don't know, but it's called The Origins of a Vampire. It's on YouTube. It's, I mean, the way it's narrated is amazing, and it gives a backstory to almost every character in The Lost Boys, to include where
Fan fiction, yeah,
where Laddie came from, how he ended up. You know, there's a lot of holes, but you know, the movie's got to be 2 hours, it can't be 12. It's tell you everything. But it talks about Grandpa, talks about why, it talks about Laddie, where he came from, what happened after, you know, Max died and Laddie became human again, and what happened psychologically to a 10-year-old that, you know, that happens. It's really cool. I don't know who did it. It's out there. You know, I was very entertained with it, but it's on YouTube, so it might fill in some gaps, whether they're fiction or not, but I thought it was cool.
Maybe he was just letting them figure it out for themselves and not intervening until he had to.
He came in clutch just when they needed him most. So that's Grandpa's time to do. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
So, have you any like favorite vampires or any movies related to vampires that you kind of thought about looking at, modeling yourself back then in the day, like the Bella Lugosi, the I don't know, Chris Sarandon from Fright Night, those kind of. Fright Night I think came out around the same time. Did you kind of think?
No, I mean, for me, I just, just with Joel, I looked at my character, and just embodied the spirit of being a, rebel or just in a gang. And the fact that we were vampires and didn't model it after anything, just knew that, that's what we did. And trusted the imaginary circumstance and went with it. I mean, Joel basically gave me direction and said, when I auditioned, you're not going to play David. We all read for David, or me, Brooke, and Alex, I think, and then he put us where he thought we were. And he told me, you don't have a lot of lines, but you're going to be featured, and just let the camera find you, and just be truthful in the scene. And so I didn't really, you put on the clothes, and you're in this group, and it sort of just feels right, So I didn't really look to any, and I was new as an actor too. So the research was just really getting to know Brooke and that bond, and then feeling part of this gang and whatnot. But there was something else. I was just going back. Good question though, but it was going back to your thing at the ending of the film. And I'm a screenwriter. I work with other writers and filmmaker. The thing that I noticed that was interesting about the ending is one of the things you never want to do is take the climax out of the protagonist's hands. He has to have an active part in the climax and the resolution. And as I was watching this film, this is how well it's crafted too. At the end, when Grandpa comes in with the truck and the stakes and they go through Kiefer's chest, at the last second, you see, and I just picked this up, you see Jason push Kiefer into the line of fire. And that's just good filmmaking, because he had an active part in his story and the climax resolution. But I just thought that was cool. And I learned about screenwriting and I dissect and look at movies, but normally I like to just go enjoy it. And I think that's what this movie has done for so long. It's an escape, it's a fun, ride. And the fact that we're still here how many years later is just a testament to the quality of the filmmaking. Jason talks about this, that in a movie today, you'd see the vamp fangs feeding in the first 10 seconds. In this movie, you meet the Lost Boys, you see the brothers connecting, you see the fish out of water, they're in their town, it's coming of age. And you meet the vampires in the carousel, but you don't see them as vampires until about 25-30 minutes into the film. So the onions peel slowly. And that's, to me, quality storytelling. It's not just feeding you everything all at once, but Jackie, good thing. If I were to play a vampire today, maybe I'd research and look at others, but it's just something, that I think each role is different on how you approach it.
But I also think that's a really good question, Nick. I think that if we would have done that, we wouldn't have played what we did in such an original way. Because when we were going through the trial run, when Joel really didn't have an idea of how we were going to look, we did a bunch of test runs, and there was one iteration where we looked beastly, and it wasn't what. And then Joel saw it, and he says, "No, they're not sexy enough." Right? And so, of course, he went with the contacts that hurt the worst. Of course, he went with all of that. Of course, he went with actually putting on acrylics, and for a 10-year-old, not having any press on. They're real acrylics. Went to the thing and they're shaped like a razor blade. So, but it all worked. It all looked good. So I think if somebody would have really went and to your point, researched something, it might not have come out as authentic in that particular biker gang, teenage, biker kids. that it otherwise could have. And I'm not sure Joel asked anybody to do that. I know he asked Feldman and Newlander to go watch every Chuck Norris and Rambo movie. And they did, so it was their character turned out.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm just wondering what you guys are doing now. You answered part of the question. You're doing screenwriting and stuff. Are you both still in the business? Or are you both? Maybe I should know this, but I don't. You know, are you still doing that, or are you doing something different?
Working at different things. I did a film, came out on Amazon Prime called The Ghost Trap. It's not a ghost movie. It's a weird title for a drama, but some really good actors in that film. Sarah Ferguson Coates, who's in White Lotus, Stephen Ogg. You know, it's about lobster fishermen up in Maine. So I shot that about a year and a half ago. Did a couple of shorts recently. Recently produced a friend of mine's record, and you can find it on Spotify. I'm plugging it. You know, Trevor LeSueur, this is rock, and I got to write on a bunch of songs with him. But you know, always trying to do things creative and pursue that.
Yeah, it's a little different. So from the time I was 9 until I was 18, it was, like I said, it's the first thing that I had done. And so when you're affording a movie like this, the doors, they don't open, they slam. And so you go from trying, I think I did 5 auditions, you know, in a 4 or 5 month period, to doing 5 or 6 auditions a day. And it was an awesome grind, right, for a long, long time. And it's not that for me anymore. It's not the grind anymore, and I'm pretty selective, and there's certain projects and things that I'll do. Of course, these, you know, I took 5 years off from even coming out to a convention, and I just recently, you know, started doing this again. And, you know, it's, as you look at it from, we're older now, honestly, I've done a lot. You make me feel old, you know, because I was 10 years old, particularly for this movie. But just a little bit more selective of the things, and you know, look, all of us have different, you know, life directions and things that have happened, and choices and families and all that stuff. But the cool thing is, especially when we get to do this with you guys, is it's a treat for us because we get to kind of hang out again as we're all distracted from all the things that we do. And so for me, that is certainly a bonus. And obviously, with the 40 years coming up for this particular movie, I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of us doing this. Probably the rest of us that are still here. Because there's one thing that doesn't stop, it's time, right? So, yeah, it's cool. Great question.
Thank you for your question. I have a question about the legacy of the film, because as a parent myself, I introduced my kids to it, and my kids have now introduced the movie to their kids. And I'm sure, how many of you introduced this film to your kids? How many of you are kids here? Because your parents love the movie. So how does that make you feel, watching this whole generational love for this timeless film that is not only timeless, but also a time capsule, because it's very much a product of its time, but ironically still holds up.
Well, I can share that with you. So we didn't get together until 2005 to do one of these things in the UK. And I didn't realize, you know, until I looked at it from an older lens, what this movie was. And then I became an actor to a fan of the movie. And then meeting some fans and seeing the tattoo of Laddie on their arm, you know, and that meant that much to that person. Whether they were going through a bad time, or we all had that. I've got a song or a record or something, or a good time, or whatever. And then as I looked back at it, and I heard somebody articulate this in such a meaningful way, he said, well, Billy, it might have been you. This movie had, you know, alienated youth, right? It's got unassuming comedy. They didn't rock with us, you know, they were funny, and they were hilarious, a great soundtrack.
A lot of universal themes, single motherhood, you know, first love, you know, coming of age, all these.
And horror.
And humor, and music, and style. You know, Joel came from designing windows on Fifth Avenue, you know, and he had a real aesthetic of fashion. And, you know, just everything came together for this. And every part, I mean, Bo Welch, who designed the cave, you know, so many factors of, Joel basically picked the best people he could have. Dick Donner, too, was the producer. You know, it just was sort of an amazing coming together of so many talented artists that, you know, and then Michael Chapman was a cinematographer. He had shot Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, and then he's going to make a vampire kids movie. But it's, you know, it stands the test of time because of the quality of all the people who were part of it. You know.
100%.
And just to add on to that, 'cause there's fans, teenagers that are coming up that their parents didn't introduce them to this movie. And I'm curious, I said, how did you find this movie? And they said TikTok. So apparently it's on TikTok.
I guess it's trending on TikTok. Really? Some of you probably did. Any more questions from you guys? Yes?
To speak, Billy, you were saying about some of the practical effects. That scene hanging from the bridge, how was that shot?
Yeah, we had the wires and we were hanging, and it was, you know, the cranes lifted us up and, you know, got us up there, and then we strapped down the wires, and we did that. But then they also, in the sound stage, they had the stuntmen jumping off the bridge into like boxes. You'd think they'd jump into like a pad, but the stuntmen like to use boxes, and they stack, you know, big boxes up about 30 feet, and they crash through the boxes, and then, you know, some way they made it look like it was, you know, however far it was, but it was all done without CGI, which was pretty cool. Today they wouldn't do it that way. But yeah, I was just thinking a minute ago, but good question. The fact is that they don't, you know, to do it in camera, to do it practically, you know, and the stunts and everything, you know, it's just, that's how films were made back then. Now it's a little different. You kind of see the difference or something, you know, the analog effect, to me, is just more real, but you know, technology or whatever, if it's a tool and you can make it work for you, that's great. But I heard someone, I think it was Robert England. I heard him talking last night. He was on Nightline. They were doing something about Scarefest. They called it Fright Line. And just this is the comment I want to share. You know, he said, why are these movies? Why is there such a big thing for horror and vampires and all this stuff? And you know, I've been asked that question before. I didn't really have an answer, but he said because it makes us, for that moment when we're scared to death, you know, in a sense, unconsciously even, it makes us confront our own mortality. And yet we survive the movie, but in a way, there's something primal about it, or, you know, just was interesting comment he did.
Yeah, there's something about being scared while also knowing you're going to be completely safe.
Right.
And there's a comfort in that.
And you,
Agree? Yeah. I feel like that's almost a universal feeling that we have when it comes to horror. Good question. Thank you. Any last hand up? Yeah.
Was anyone heard on the film? Because some of the oddities.
The keeper guy, he hurt his wrist on a motorcycle.
Was it like hot dog in a motorcycle trying to impress the girl?
Really, he might have.
Yeah, he told that story a couple years ago. Yeah, trying to impress a girl that Jason wanted. It was a whole thing.
And then is that why he put gloves on him?
Yeah. Yeah, and he tied his hand to the handlebars because he couldn't use it, right? Again, suffering for the art. Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Yes?
Do you have anything you borrowed from the set back in the day?
I wish. I know Billy does, but I didn't keep anything except the rap jacket. It's a jean jacket that says Lost Boys. But yeah, I met somebody here who they're going to try to make the Laddie's jacket in my size now, which is much bigger than my boy.
Yeah, I got my biker jacket I asked for. They gave it to me. I got actually 2 of them. And then I lost one of them, and my ex-girlfriend had it, and then she said she lost it, and then we found it because her sister has it. So maybe I'll get it back, but I have one of them.
So where is it?
So I wanted to ask you, Chance, do you have any, what advice would you give to parents of kids who want to get into Hollywood?
I say absolutely do it. You know, it's interesting, like I said, one thing, don't push them, right? If if that's something that they want to do, great. You know, like I said, my dad, everybody knows the group Van Halen. So when David Lee Roth left Van Halen, my dad did his first music video, California Girls. I saw him in that, and I said, man, I want to try this, Dad. Like, can I? And so that's how it worked for me. And like I said, I was very fortunate. You know, it doesn't work that 5 auditions in, you get this movie, and then boom, everything's sort of done. It's a real grind, you know. You gotta be prepared. You gotta be prepared and get your kids ready for rejection, because there's a lot more no's than there are yes. And so there's some kids that are built that can handle it. There's some kids that really want it and they can handle it. There's some kids that, you know, it won't work, right? It's different personalities, different things. So you gotta be aware and make sure that, you know, it's your kid leading the front, not you know, dragging them along. I think that would be the case.
I would say, in this day and age, the technology's out there. You can go bring Hollywood to your home. You know, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be an actor, a filmmaker, just start playing with the camera. Start creating with your friends. Make your work. You know, it's about the work. You don't have to go to Hollywood. Hollywood, you know, if your little film, I mean, there are kids now making films that are mind-blowing, that are being bought by Hollywood. And then, like, even the guy who made Terrifier, I haven't seen this too but that guy made his own film, and now he's calling the shots, you know. And if you want to be an actor, get in your school plays, you know, do scenes with your friends. You don't have to go out to Hollywood. And I don't know, you know, just get into the art. It's a collaborative form. If you're not a screenwriter, find a friend who can write, you know, write a scene. Just start playing, you know, if it's music, art, painting, whatever, just, you gotta just get into it. And all the tools are available now for everyone, you know. I think Coppola said one day you're gonna see that everyone's gonna have a camera, and the movies are coming from all over the world, incredible. So you don't have to go to Hollywood, it's a little crazy.
That's awesome. Any other questions? Yes.
So my question might be a stupid question, but by the way, Lost Boys is like one of my, I just watched it a couple weeks ago, it's like one of my favorite vampire movies. We know that Max is the father of all the vampires. Was there ever a discussion about who fathered the Lost Boys as far as each one of you?
You mean turn them?
Who turned them? Mm-hmm.
We never talk about it, but on the fan fiction, they talk about it.
Well, I was going to say I'll have to go watch that.
In depth, you know, I don't think there was ever a discussion about it in the original script. And I think when the movie wrapped, I think it was about 3 hours long. And so Joel and the editors really had to cut it down. Unfortunately, Laddie had some more lines were edited before, and it wasn't needed. The movie was great how it was, but. You know, I don't think from the original script, as I look back, and I actually went back and read the original script, there was no backstory really to any of the characters at all, other than Laddie. There was a backstory that you know, how he ended up a star, and how did this 10-year-old end up in this situation? Well, there was a backstory in the original script, but the fan fiction, again, plugging this person, whoever it is that's out there, they did a great job. It fills in some holes that maybe otherwise you didn't have. But that's the great thing about anything that you like. There's always more questions that you have about any movie. There's some movies that I wish were 10 hours long. And I think, what about you know? Yeah. But that leaves it to the fans' imagination.
Yeah, and well, another thing sort of along those lines, you know, you have the fan fiction. Anyone can write any backstory they want, and it could be good. And what I'm loving is seeing all the art that's being created, new posters, new pictures of the Lost Boys, and it's just taken on a life of its own. Like, we see new posters every year and new artwork that's created from you guys, and it's just amazing.
Thank you for your question. I want to ask both of you have very different endings to your characters. But if Dwayne hadn't survived, where would he be after? And knowing that Laddie did survive, where would he be?
Laddie joined the Frog Brothers and killed a bunch of vampires.
That's your fan fiction.
And then he went nuts, and then he found the love of his life in the Robins. That's it.
I love that. Laddie deserves it after bed trauma.
I think if Dwayne survived, he would have found his way to some, because I had this idea for a film, and it could actually think about it, that Dwayne could have went this direction where he searched inwardly to find out who he was on a spiritual level, and he found out his consciousness, and that this, living forever, it is a curse in a sense. So he would sort of maybe find a way to awaken to that, and then try to prevent David and the others from feeding on all these, victims, in a sense. So I had this idea of an enlightened vampire and a dark vampire, and all the kids are coming out to LA because they all want to be turned into a vampire because of the state of the world and the pending doom. The future doesn't look so bright, and so maybe he'd find his way to that to try to get the blood in other ways or whatever.
I feel like I need that version. That's a Lost Boys prequel that I feel like we need, written by Billy Wirth. Any other questions? Yes?
I have one more. Sure. If you guys ever came to HHN, which we're hoping you do, would you ever do a cameo in there or show up and talk about it? They did a Lost Boys house.
They did a Lost Boys house at Halloween Horror Nights.
Yes.
Oh, wow, where is that?
Here in Orlando.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Oh, you have to.
But we've been waiting for years, but there's so much technical stuff.
Yeah, probably rights related and stuff like that. But what she's asking, if there was ever a Lost Boys house at Halloween Horror Nights, would you guys be willing to make an appearance?
Interactive experience.
Yeah. Yes, I think it would be cool. It would be really awesome. I did, it was about 10 years ago, I did it with the Frog Brothers. It was Corey and Jameson. We did the opening night of Halloween Horror Nights in Universal in Hollywood. And what an experience. It's the first and last time I've been to Halloween Horror Nights, and it was really just an awesome experience. I'm sure here is equal.
Well, Terrifier's here this year, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's
The
a great.
4-year anniversary.
4-year anniversary, let's make it happen.
Petition time. Who's in charge? You're in charge of petition. Start saying it.
We keep
All right.
asking.
Yeah, listen, manifest. Say it enough, it'll happen. All right, we have time for one more question. Yes, make it count.
One of my favorite scenes is when you guys are hanging under the bridge waiting Michael. Can you talk a little about like that, being on set and then like dropping, like how is that done? I was always really curious.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned that a minute ago, but that was a combination of being out on a real location and filming on a bridge, and then also on the soundstage with the stuntman and, building a mock-up bridge. And, that was, for me, I've said this before, but, I haven't done a lot of acting, and, Brooke is so good, and Kiefer, these guys are good. As we're jumping off the bridge and talking to David and everything, Joel said, you gotta do something, to make your exit. And so, like, I don't know what Brooke did, like bottoms up or something, jumps off, and Alex, I don't know what Alex did, and I'm like panicked because I'm about to jump and I don't have anything to do. I haven't thought of anything. But just at the last moment, I just went boom, like double thing or whatever. It was something. But that was just an exciting moment for me. But I kind of pulled it off because it came at the last second. But that was scary. Because, if I don't do, what am I going to do? Jump off and do nothing? I had to do something, and it just came at the last second. But I remember that.
It worked.
It did work. Do you have anything you want
I just want to say thank you guys. You guys asked really cool questions.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Really, really awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming.
If you like the video, please like and subscribe.